The rain came without warning, turning the lonely Montana highway into a river of mud and broken dreams. A young woman stood beside an old pickup truck with tears mixing into the rain, staring at the smoking engine that had carried her through years of struggle before finally giving up. She had no money for a mechanic, no family waiting for her, and no idea that the next person to stop would completely change the course of her life. She believed she was about to meet an ordinary cowboy. She had no way of knowing that the man wearing dusty boots and a faded hat was one of the wealthiest billionaires in America. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still exists, that second chances can change lives, and that love is found in the most unexpected places, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Love Without Limits for more heart-touching stories that remind us love has no boundaries. Grace Thompson had spent most of her 28 years fighting battles nobody could see. After losing both parents in a tragic accident several years earlier, she had worked endless shifts at a small diner outside Bozeman, Montana, trying to keep herself afloat while paying off debts left behind by medical bills. Every dollar mattered. Every meal required planning. Every morning began before sunrise and ended long after darkness covered the mountains. Despite carrying so much pain, Grace never stopped helping strangers. She believed that even when life became unfair, kindness was something nobody could take away. That rainy afternoon, after her truck broke down, she expected hours of waiting before anyone noticed her. Most cars sped past without slowing down. Then an aging ranch truck pulled onto the shoulder. Behind the wheel sat a broad-shouldered cowboy named Caleb Walker. His weathered denim jacket, worn leather gloves, and dusty boots made him look like every hard-working rancher in the valley. There was nothing about his appearance that suggested unimaginable wealth. His hands were rough from years of honest labor, and his smile carried a quiet warmth that immediately calmed Grace's fear. Caleb quickly examined the truck and realized it could not be repaired on the roadside. Instead of offering empty sympathy, he attached a tow chain and carefully pulled her truck back to his ranch several miles away. Grace expected a small property with a simple barn. Instead, she found thousands of acres stretching across rolling hills beneath breathtaking mountains. Horses ran freely through green pastures while cattle grazed peacefully. Even then, she assumed Caleb simply worked for the owner of the ranch. The following morning, Caleb invited Grace to stay until her truck could be repaired. Embarrassed but grateful, she offered to help with chores instead of accepting charity. She cleaned horse stalls, helped prepare meals for ranch workers, repaired old fencing, and worked harder than anyone expected. Every evening, exhaustion filled her body, yet she smiled because she felt useful again. Caleb quietly watched her determination. Unlike many people he had met over the years, Grace never asked about money, never complained, and never expected special treatment. Unknown to Grace, Caleb was hiding a secret that had become a burden heavier than any saddle he had ever carried. Years earlier, he had inherited Walker Agricultural Holdings, one of the largest farming and land investment companies in the United States. Worth billions of dollars, the company owned ranches, food processing plants, and agricultural technology firms across the country. Yet after witnessing people become interested only in his wealth, Caleb began dressing like an ordinary cowboy whenever he visited his ranches. He wanted someone to see the man behind the fortune instead of the fortune behind the man. Days slowly turned into weeks as Grace waited for affordable parts to repair her truck. During that time, she discovered the beauty of simple living. Together they watched golden sunsets spread across the Montana sky. They rescued an injured foal abandoned during a storm. They helped elderly neighbors repair storm damage without asking for anything in return. Every act of kindness strengthened an invisible bond between them. Grace admired Caleb's humility, believing he was simply the hardest-working ranch hand she had ever met. One afternoon, everything changed. A convoy of luxury SUVs rolled through the ranch gates. Men and women wearing expensive business suits stepped out carrying folders and laptops. They greeted Caleb with immediate respect, calling him Mr. Walker, while discussing mergers worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Grace froze in complete disbelief. She listened as executives described international investments, charitable foundations, and agricultural projects affecting thousands of American families. The quiet cowboy who had repaired fences beside her was not an employee. He owned everything. The discovery overwhelmed Grace. Memories of people who valued status more than character came rushing back. She feared Caleb would assume she had stayed only because of his wealth. Without saying much, she packed her few belongings and quietly prepared to leave before sunrise. She believed walking away would protect both their hearts. Caleb found the note she left on the kitchen table. It simply thanked him for showing kindness to someone the world had almost forgotten. Instead of letting her disappear, he drove several hours until he found Grace waiting for a bus outside a small Montana town. His face showed neither anger nor disappointment, only sadness that she believed she needed to leave. Grace finally understood something that had been true from the beginning. She had fallen in love with the man who fixed her truck in the rain, carried heavy feed bags without complaint, laughed around campfires, and treated every ranch worker with dignity. She had never fallen in love with a billionaire because she never knew one existed. Caleb realized that Grace had given him the greatest gift imaginable, proof that genuine love still existed beyond wealth and status. Over the following months, their lives became intertwined in ways neither could have imagined. Grace helped Caleb expand his charitable foundation, creating scholarship programs for children of struggling farming families throughout the United States. They invested in rural hospitals, supported food banks, and rebuilt communities affected by natural disasters. Every decision reflected the same compassion that first brought them together on that rainy roadside. Although Caleb possessed unimaginable wealth, the happiest moments of his life remained wonderfully simple. Sharing coffee while watching the sunrise, riding horses through open fields, holding Grace's hand beneath endless Montana skies. Those moments reminded them both that the richest life is measured not by bank accounts, but by the people who choose to stay beside us when nothing else seems certain. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to Love Without Limits, and help spread stories that remind the world compassion is still alive. Your support allows more people to discover hope through stories like this one. Before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please leave a comment below and tell us. Do you believe true love can exist without knowing someone's wealth or status? We'd truly love to read your thoughts. ****. As the years passed, visitors often admired the breathtaking Walker Ranch and assumed its greatest treasure was the fortune behind it. They couldn't have been more mistaken. The real treasure had appeared on a rainy highway when one broken truck, one ordinary act of kindness, and one humble cowboy crossed paths with a woman whose heart had never stopped believing in goodness. Grace learned that appearances can hide extraordinary truths, while Caleb discovered that the greatest fortune in life is finding someone who sees your heart before your success. Together, they proved that love built on kindness will always outlast wealth, fame, and every storm life sends our way. Sometimes the person who changes your life forever arrives wearing dusty boots instead of an expensive suit, reminding us that the richest hearts are often hidden beneath the simplest hats. The silence arrived in a single terrifying moment. 1 second, the roar of helicopters, alarms, and desperate voices filled the air above the mountains of Colorado. The next, there was nothing. No sound. No warning. No heartbeat. No voices calling his name. Ethan Brooks, one of the youngest billionaires in the United States, opened his eyes after the devastating helicopter crash, expecting to hear the world rushing back to life. Instead, he found himself trapped inside complete silence. The doctors would later tell him that the accident had permanently taken his hearing. But what no one could explain was how a man who had built billion-dollar companies could suddenly feel poorer than he had ever been. The people around him spoke constantly, yet none of them truly reached him. Until one woman quietly entered his life and reminded him that the deepest conversations are sometimes spoken without a single sound. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still has the power to heal broken hearts, and that everyone deserves a second chance no matter how difficult life becomes, please like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Love Without Limits for more emotional stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and unconditional love. 38-year-old Ethan Brooks had earned his fortune through innovation, determination, and relentless work. From his headquarters in Denver, Colorado, He led one of America's fastest-growing renewable energy companies. Newspapers celebrated his achievements, investors admired his confidence, and thousands of employees depended on his leadership. Yet behind the polished business image lived a man whose entire identity revolved around communication. He loved giving speeches, negotiating impossible deals, and inspiring young entrepreneurs. Losing his hearing felt like losing the very foundation of who he believed himself to be. After months of surgeries and rehabilitation, Ethan returned to his luxurious mansion overlooking the Rocky Mountains. The expensive artwork, elegant furniture, and breathtaking views suddenly felt empty. Business meetings became exhausting. Friends stopped visiting because they felt uncomfortable. Executives relied on assistants to translate conversations into text. Every smile Ethan received seemed filled with pity instead of respect. Even worse, he slowly withdrew from the charitable foundation he had spent years building because public appearances reminded him of everything he had lost. Meanwhile, several miles away, 29-year-old Hannah Carter quietly lived a life few people noticed. Raised by loving parents in a small Colorado town, Hannah had learned American Sign Language as a child because her younger brother, Joshua, had been born deaf. Long before she learned algebra or history, she learned that communication was far more than spoken words. A smile, a gentle touch, patient eyes, and understanding could carry emotions deeper than voices ever could. After Joshua passed away from a rare illness during his teenage years, Hannah dedicated her life to helping others living with hearing loss. She became a rehabilitation specialist at a recovery center that focused on rebuilding confidence as much as rebuilding communication. One rainy autumn morning, Hannah was asked to work privately with a wealthy patient whose progress had nearly stopped. She accepted the assignment without caring about his reputation or fortune. When she entered the rehabilitation room, Ethan barely looked at her. He had grown tired of specialists who treated him like another project destined to fail. Instead of forcing conversation, Hannah simply greeted him using fluent sign language with calm confidence and genuine warmth. For the first time since the accident, Ethan looked surprised. He responded awkwardly, remembering only the few signs he had reluctantly learned during therapy. Hannah never laughed at his mistakes. She encouraged every small improvement, celebrating effort rather than perfection. She taught him that silence was not an enemy, but another language waiting to be understood. Week after week, they met beneath large windows overlooking snow-covered mountains. Their lessons slowly evolved into something much deeper than rehabilitation. They shared stories through expressive hands, patient smiles, notebooks, and meaningful eye contact. Ethan discovered that without constant noise, people often revealed their truest selves. As winter covered Colorado in brilliant white snow, Ethan began visiting schools for deaf children alongside Hannah. At first, he simply observed. Then he started signing short messages of encouragement. The children responded with excitement that words could never fully describe. They did not see a billionaire who had lost something. They saw someone who understood their world. Their acceptance awakened a part of Ethan that had nearly disappeared after the crash. Outside those classrooms, however, challenges remained. Members of Ethan's executive board questioned whether he could continue leading the company. Investors quietly doubted his future. Financial magazines speculated that his disability would force him into retirement. Ethan read every headline in painful silence. The criticism reopened wounds he believed had finally begun to heal. Hannah noticed the growing sadness behind his eyes. Rather than offering empty reassurance, she reminded him through steady encouragement that leadership had never depended on hearing every voice in the room. Great leaders succeeded because they listened with empathy, wisdom, and compassion. Those qualities had never left him. They had simply become harder for him to recognize. Determined to prove both himself and the world wrong, Ethan transformed his company in ways no one expected. Every meeting included live captioning and sign language interpreters. Recruitment programs expanded opportunities for employees with disabilities. New technology made workplaces more accessible than ever before. Instead of hiding his hearing loss, Ethan openly embraced it. What many believed would destroy his career became the very reason thousands admired him even more deeply. Months later, Ethan was invited to receive a National Humanitarian Award in Washington, D.C. Cameras filled the grand ballroom. Business leaders, politicians, educators, and families gathered from across the United States. Standing beneath bright lights, Ethan delivered his acceptance speech entirely in sign language, while captions appeared on giant screens behind him. The room remained completely silent until he finished. Then every person stood together in a long-standing ovation that needed no sound to express its meaning. Tears filled countless eyes, including Hannah's. After the ceremony, reporters praised Ethan's courage, but he knew the truth. Success had not returned because he became stronger alone. It returned because one compassionate woman refused to let silence become isolation. Hannah never tried to fix him. She simply found a way to reach the heart that had become trapped behind fear. Together, they expanded Ethan's charitable foundation into one of America's largest organizations supporting deaf education, hearing rehabilitation, scholarships, and communication technology. Families who once felt forgotten found hope. Children gained opportunities that previous generations had never imagined. Ethan often smiled whenever he watched young students signing confidently across classrooms, remembering how impossible his own future had once seemed. If this story has touched your heart, please support Love Without Limits by liking this video, sharing it with your family and friends, subscribing to the channel, and helping us spread stories that remind the world compassion is stronger than any obstacle. Your support allows these messages of hope to reach even more hearts. Before this story comes to an end, please leave a comment below and tell us. Have you ever met someone who changed your life simply by understanding you when no one else could? We'd truly love to hear your story. ***. Years after the accident, visitors still asked Ethan what the hardest part of losing his hearing had been. They expected him to mention the silence. Instead, he quietly smiled and signed that the hardest part had been believing he would never truly connect with another person again. Meeting Hannah taught him that love, friendship, and understanding are never limited by sound. Hearts speak a language far older than words, and those willing to listen with compassion will always hear what others cannot. In the end, the billionaire who lost his hearing discovered something far more valuable than the fortune he had built. He discovered that the greatest voices in life are often the ones that never make a sound, and that one caring soul can restore hope to a heart that believed it would remain silent forever. The first thing everyone noticed was the stranger's hands. They were rough from hard work, covered in soap bubbles, and moving quickly through towering stacks of dirty dishes in the tiny kitchen of a struggling roadside diner in Tennessee. Customers barely looked at him. The waitresses assumed he was another desperate man searching for a paycheck. The regulars whispered that he probably had nowhere else to go. No one could have imagined that the quiet dishwasher wearing faded jeans and a plain baseball cap owned one of the largest restaurant empires in America. Even more unbelievable was the reason he had chosen to work there in secret. By the time the truth was finally revealed, an entire town would discover that true wealth is measured not by the size of a bank account, but by the size of a person's heart. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives, that second chances are worth giving, and that every person deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their appearance, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to Love Without Limits for more emotional stories that remind us compassion is the greatest treasure of all. The small town of Franklin, Tennessee, was known for its warm smiles, country roads, and a family-owned diner called Maple Creek Diner. It had been serving homemade breakfasts, fresh pies, and comforting meals for nearly 40 years. The owner, 34-year-old Sarah Mitchell, had inherited the diner from her late father, Michael, who had spent his entire life building it into the heart of the community. After his passing, Sarah promised herself she would never let his dream disappear. Unfortunately, promises were much easier to make than to keep. Business had become painfully slow. A new highway diverted travelers away from town. Food prices continued rising, and unpaid bills covered Sarah's office desk like fallen autumn leaves. Every month, she faced impossible decisions. Should she pay the electric bill or replace the broken refrigerator? Should she order fresh ingredients or save enough money to pay her employees? Her loyal staff stayed because they loved her, but Sarah secretly feared she would soon have to close the doors forever. Nearly 800 miles away in Dallas, Texas, 50-year-old Benjamin Carter sat inside the headquarters of Carter Hospitality Group, a company worth billions of dollars with hotels, luxury resorts, and hundreds of restaurants across the United States. Financial success had brought him every comfort imaginable, yet something important had quietly disappeared along the way. His late mother had owned a small diner when he was a boy. She taught him that every meal carried a story, and every customer deserved respect. As his company expanded, Benjamin worried those simple values had been replaced by profit reports and shareholder meetings. Rather than relying on consultants, Benjamin made an unusual decision. Without informing anyone except his personal attorney, he disappeared for several weeks under a different name. Wearing ordinary clothes and driving an old pickup truck, he traveled across small-town America searching for family-owned restaurants struggling to survive. He wanted to understand what life looked like beyond executive boardrooms. That journey eventually brought him to Maple Creek Diner. Sarah noticed the quiet stranger reading the handwritten, "Help Wanted" sign taped beside the entrance. He introduced himself simply as Ben and asked whether she still needed kitchen help. His resume consisted of only a few previous restaurant jobs, carefully rewritten to hide his true identity. Sarah could not afford to be selective. She hired him immediately as the dishwasher and kitchen assistant. From his very first day, Ben worked harder than anyone expected. He arrived before sunrise, cleaned every pan until it shined, organized the storage room, repaired broken shelves without being asked, and never complained about long hours. When servers became overwhelmed during breakfast rushes, he quietly stepped in to refill coffee, carry heavy boxes, and sweep floors. Nobody saw a billionaire. They saw a humble man willing to do whatever needed to be done. Over the following weeks, Ben watched Sarah sacrifice everything to protect her employees. More than once she skipped meals so the cooks could eat first. She quietly paid a waitress's medical prescription after learning her young son was sick. She refused to lay off workers, even though doing so would have saved money. At night, after everyone left, she remained alone balancing unpaid invoices while pretending to smile the next morning. Ben admired her more each day. He also noticed things others overlooked. The diner served incredible food but lacked online visibility. Its menu hadn't changed in years. The dining room felt warm but outdated. Customers loved the atmosphere, yet tourists driving nearby had no idea the diner even existed. Instead of revealing his experience, Ben began offering small suggestions that sounded like simple observations. He encouraged adding a daily special inspired by local farms, creating handwritten stories about Sarah's father on each table, and inviting musicians from the community to perform on weekends. Sarah listened because the ideas came from someone who genuinely cared. Slowly, little miracles began happening. Families returned. Travelers stopped after seeing glowing online reviews written by satisfied customers. Weekend music nights filled every table. Local farmers proudly supplied fresh ingredients. For the first time in years, hope quietly returned to Maple Creek Diner. Then disaster struck. A powerful electrical fire broke out in the kitchen late one evening after closing. Although everyone escaped safely, much of the equipment was destroyed. Insurance covered only part of the damage because several appliances were too old. Standing inside the smoke-filled building the following morning, Sarah believed her father's dream had finally reached its end. News crews arrived as neighbors gathered outside the damaged diner. While reporters interviewed Sarah, several black luxury SUVs unexpectedly pulled into the parking lot. Men and women dressed in business suits stepped out carrying briefcases and architectural plans. They walked directly toward Ben and greeted him as Mr. Carter, chairman of Carter Hospitality Group. The crowd fell completely silent. Sarah stared in disbelief as television reporters suddenly recognized the face hidden beneath the baseball cap. The dishwasher who had scrubbed pans beside her every morning was one of the wealthiest restaurant owners in America. Many expected Benjamin to announce he had secretly purchased the diner. Instead, he surprised everyone. He explained that he had come searching for something money could not buy, a reminder of why he first fell in love with the restaurant business. He had found that reminder in Sarah's unwavering compassion, her honest leadership, and the loyalty shared by everyone inside Maple Creek Diner. Rather than taking ownership, Benjamin offered to fully fund the reconstruction while allowing Sarah and her family to remain the sole owners forever. Construction began within days. The rebuilt diner kept its original charm while adding a modern kitchen, updated dining area, and community gathering space. Benjamin's company quietly handled the expenses without placing its corporate logo anywhere inside the building. He insisted that every customer should continue feeling they were visiting Michael Mitchell's diner, not another corporate restaurant. The reopening became the biggest celebration Franklin had seen in decades. Families filled every table. Local musicians performed on the front porch. Former employees returned just to congratulate Sarah. Benjamin stood in the kitchen wearing the same apron he had always worn, happily washing dishes while smiling at the laughter echoing through the dining room. When reporters asked why one of America's richest men was still standing at the sink, Benjamin simply smiled. He knew that no executive office, private jet, or billion-dollar investment had ever brought him the peace he felt while helping ordinary people protect something they loved. If this story has touched your heart, please support Love Without Limits by liking this video, sharing it with someone who believes kindness still exists, subscribing to our channel, and helping us spread stories that remind the world that compassion will always matter more than wealth. Before this story comes to an end, we have one special request. Please leave a comment below and tell us. If you discovered that someone you worked beside every day was secretly a billionaire, would it change the way you saw them? Or would their kindness matter more than their fortune? We'd truly love to hear your thoughts. ****. Years later, visitors often traveled to Maple Creek Diner, hoping to meet the famous billionaire who once worked there in secret. Some were disappointed when they didn't find him. What they failed to realize was that Benjamin had already left behind something far more valuable than his presence. He had restored hope to a family, preserved a father's lifelong dream, and reminded an entire town that greatness is revealed not by titles or fortunes, but by humility, generosity, and the willingness to serve others without expecting recognition. In the end, the richest man in the room was never the one with the biggest bank account. He was the one willing to stand quietly at the sink, washing dishes with grateful hands, proving that true success begins the moment we choose to lift someone else instead of ourselves. The restaurant fell into complete chaos in less than 10 seconds. A graceful elderly woman collapsed beside her table, her coffee cup crashing onto the floor as frightened customers froze in disbelief. Some screamed. Others reached for their phones. A few simply stood there, too shocked to move. Then a young waitress dropped her serving tray, rushed across the dining room without hesitation, and immediately began performing CPR with calm determination. Every second mattered. Every compression carried the weight of a stranger's life. Just as hope began to fade, the front doors burst open, and a terrified billionaire ran into the restaurant, his face filled with panic. The moment he saw the woman lying on the floor, he cried out with a desperation that silenced the entire room. It was his mother, and the young waitress fighting to save her life was about to change both of their futures forever. Before we continue, if you believe that one act of kindness can change someone's life forever, and that second chances still exist in this world, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Love Without Limits for more emotional stories that remind us that humanity is our greatest strength. On a quiet autumn afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, 27-year-old Rebecca Collins began her shift at the Blue Willow Cafe, just as she had every day for nearly 3 years. Most customers knew her by name because she never forgot a smile, a favorite meal, or an encouraging word. Few people knew that Rebecca had once dreamed of becoming a registered nurse. She had completed most of her nursing education before financial hardship forced her to leave college after her father, Thomas Collins, suffered a devastating stroke. Every dollar she earned as a waitress helped pay his medical bills while supporting her younger brother, Samuel, who was still finishing high school. Although life had interrupted her dream, the medical knowledge she had gained remained deeply rooted in her heart. That afternoon, an elegant elderly woman named Margaret Hayes entered the cafe alone. She ordered homemade chicken soup, warm tea, and a slice of apple pie. Rebecca noticed the kindness in Margaret's eyes as they exchanged warm smiles. Margaret reminded her of her own late grandmother, whose gentle spirit had taught her to care for everyone with equal love. Only minutes later, everything changed. Margaret suddenly reached toward her chest before collapsing beside her table. Plates shattered across the floor as terrified customers gasped. Several people immediately dialed 911, but Rebecca knew emergency responders might not arrive in time. Her nursing training took over without hesitation. She checked Margaret's pulse, found none, carefully positioned her hands, and began performing CPR with steady rhythm and unwavering focus. She counted every compression silently while encouraging nearby customers to remain calm. Time seemed to slow as everyone watched hope hanging by a single thread. Meanwhile, across town, 42-year-old billionaire Jonathan Hayes sat inside a board meeting at the headquarters of Hayes Medical Technologies, one of America's largest healthcare innovation companies. His phone vibrated repeatedly with calls from his mother's cell phone. When he finally answered, a frightened customer explained what had happened before the line suddenly disconnected. Jonathan left the meeting instantly, ignoring confused executives as he raced through Asheville traffic toward the cafe. Inside the restaurant, Rebecca refused to stop. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat rolled down her face while exhaustion crept into her arms. Several customers quietly prayed. Others cried openly. Just as Rebecca feared she might lose Margaret, the elderly woman's body suddenly responded. A faint breath returned. Moments later, emergency medical personnel rushed inside, immediately taking over treatment before transporting Margaret to the hospital. At that exact moment, Jonathan burst through the cafe doors. His expensive suit was soaked with sweat, his breathing heavy from running. The instant he saw paramedics surrounding his unconscious mother, he dropped to his knees beside her stretcher. Tears filled his eyes as he realized how close he had come to losing the only family he had left. The lead paramedic explained that Margaret's survival depended largely on the immediate CPR provided by the young waitress before emergency crews arrived. Jonathan slowly turned toward Rebecca, who stood quietly in the corner with trembling hands, still wearing her stained cafe apron. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained, and completely unaware of who Jonathan Hayes was. For Jonathan, that moment changed everything. The following day, Jonathan visited the hospital where doctors delivered encouraging news. Margaret had survived because oxygen continued reaching her brain during those critical minutes before professional medical care arrived. Without Rebecca's quick action, the outcome would almost certainly have been different. Jonathan felt overwhelming gratitude, but also deep curiosity. Who was the young woman willing to fight so relentlessly for a complete stranger? Over the following week, he quietly learned Rebecca's story. He discovered her unfinished nursing education, the sacrifices she had made for her family, the long hours she worked, and the dreams she believed were permanently out of reach. She had never complained publicly, never asked anyone for help, and never expected recognition for saving Margaret's life. Jonathan decided gratitude alone was not enough. Instead of offering a simple financial reward, he personally arranged a full scholarship allowing Rebecca to complete nursing school without paying another dollar. He also ensured that her father's rehabilitation expenses would be fully covered through a charitable medical foundation established in his mother's name. Most importantly, he guaranteed Rebecca a nursing position at one of the country's leading hospitals after graduation. At first, Rebecca struggled to accept such extraordinary generosity. She believed she had simply done what anyone should have done in the same situation. Jonathan gently reminded her that many people had witnessed the emergency, but only one person possessed both the knowledge and courage to act immediately. Margaret recovered steadily over the following months. During rehabilitation, she and Rebecca formed a beautiful friendship that felt more like family than coincidence. They spent countless afternoons talking about faith, perseverance, forgiveness, and hope. Margaret often described Rebecca as the daughter she had always wished life had given her. 2 years later, Rebecca proudly graduated as a registered nurse. Jonathan and Margaret sat together in the front row, applauding with tears in their eyes as Rebecca accepted the diploma she once believed she would never earn. Standing on that stage, she realized the greatest miracle had not been saving a life inside the cafe. The miracle had been discovering how one compassionate decision could transform countless lives in return. Rebecca eventually became an emergency room nurse, where she saved many more patients during the years that followed. Every time someone thanked her, she quietly remembered the frightened elderly woman lying on the cafe floor and the moment she chose to act instead of freeze. Jonathan never forgot that day either. Inspired by Rebecca's courage, Hayes Medical Technologies expanded community CPR education programs throughout the United States, training thousands of ordinary citizens to respond confidently during cardiac emergencies. He often reminded audiences that advanced hospitals save lives every day, but sometimes heroes wear simple aprons instead of white coats. If this story touched your heart, please support love without limits by liking this video, sharing it with someone who believes kindness still changes the world, subscribing to our channel, and helping us spread stories that inspire compassion and hope. Before this story comes to an end, we have one special request. Please leave a comment below and tell us, do you believe one brave decision can change the lives of complete strangers forever? We'd truly love to read your thoughts and experiences. ***. Years later, visitors still remembered the dramatic afternoon when a waitress dropped her serving tray to save an elderly woman she had never met. Many called it a miracle. Others called it destiny. But Rebecca understood the truth better than anyone. Extraordinary moments are rarely created by extraordinary people. They are created by ordinary people who choose courage over fear, compassion over hesitation, and action over silence. On that unforgettable afternoon in North Carolina, a billionaire almost lost the person he loved most. Instead, because one young waitress refused to give up, a family was made whole again, a forgotten dream came back to life, and countless others found hope through a single act of selfless love. In the end, the greatest wealth was never found in Jonathan's fortune. It was found in Rebecca's heart, proving that true heroes are recognized not by what they own, but by the lives they are willing to save.